Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live event. I appreciate everyone that's taken the time to send us questions either by email or by messenger or on the Facebook page just to ask questions. Of course, you're free to ask those questions during the Facebook Live. Drop a note down in the comment section. Megan will get that to me, and I'm looking forward to responding to all the questions out there. Now, I'm in Ottawa. We just finished having our first caucus meeting under our new leader, Aaron O'Toole. Now, I think that a lot of people realize that I supported Aaron O'Toole in the 2017 leadership race, and I supported Peter MacKay in the campaign for leader this time around. Just need to keep in mind that both Aaron and Peter are good friends of mine. I made a decision to endorse Peter in the last leadership race because he has a big name and is well known across the country. Aaron has won handily. He has united the party. I'm proud to be supporting him in his new role as leader of the Conservative Party, and I am humbled and honored that he appointed me to shadow cabinet and to continue on in my role as the shadow minister for national defense. Especially knowing that Aaron has been a long-time advocate for Canadian Armed Forces and our veterans. He proudly served in the Royal Canadian Air Force for 10 years. He was a Sea King helicopter navigator. He was out there doing search and rescue missions, as well as, and a lot of people don't realize this, but Sea Kings, and now the replacements, the Cyclones, are sub hunters. And so he was trained to go out there as part of anti-submarine warfare to find enemy subs that could be in our waters and spent a lot of time training to do that. And then at the end of his career, he was actually training the next generation of Sea King operators who are out there protecting our shorelines from any possible attack. So, he's lived the life in the military. He's lived the life as a corporate lawyer. And now we're honored to have him as our new leader, who will be taking on the corrupt and unethical government of Justin Trudeau. A lot of people ask, what are shadow ministers? So, in the old days, we used to call them critics. And then under Andrew Scheer, we decided to go to the British term of shadow cabinet and shadow ministers. And the reason for doing that, and it is one based upon our British parliamentary history, but more importantly, it's to showcase that we are a parliament or government in waiting, and that we are shadowing the minister of government. And so in my case, for the last 5 years, I've been the shadow minister of national defense, and I have been shadowing for that entire time Minister Sajan, who is the Minister of National Defense. And so my job is to make sure I hold him to account, as it is under our parliamentary democracy, that I suggest improvements in how the government is conducting itself in this case, and how they are handling the Department of National Defense and the Canadian Armed Forces, and making the proper investments to support our troops, and putting forward the policies and the operations that make us safer and stronger as a nation. But of course, it's almost impossible to go out there and do my job as a shadow minister, and for any of us in shadow cabinet, because Justin Trudeau has prorogued Parliament. And that means that we do not have daily question period. That means that our committees have all been suspended and aren't allowed to meet during prorogation. And so nobody's home. So it was nice to get down to Ottawa, because essentially we have been in a prorogation mode for the last 6 months, ever since we shut down Parliament in March, and been meeting, in these hybrid committee of the wholes, which provide an opportunity to question the government, but it isn't true Parliament holding the government to account, and elected members of Parliament representing their ridings, raising issues that are important to their constituents. So it has been a challenging time for us in opposition, but it has worked beautifully for Justin Trudeau, who's been able to have reduced sittings of the House to pass, their legislation. Some of it was very necessary in supporting the economy and supporting Canadians as we dealt with the downturn in the economy and shutting down of businesses so that we all could stay home and stay safe and stay healthy. But now we have this incredibly large deficit of over $343 billion. And according to news, Justin Trudeau is going to suggest another $100 billion of deficit spending in the unforeseeable future so that he can completely turn Canada into a socialist state. So we can't allow him to use the pandemic crisis as a means to change our entire economy, change the way our government works, change the way our democracy functions, and ultimately change the way that Canadians receive benefits from the federal and provincial governments. This will shake us down to our financial foundations. As it's already been said by the Parliamentary Budget Officer and others, is that there is this type of spending is unsustainable, and they require more taxes to even cover part of the bills that we're passing on to the next generation. We can't continue to just print money at the Bank of Canada to cover off these deficits, because as we learned back in the 80s and 90s, the more money you put in circulation, the less value it has, and the less value it has actually results in inflation, or in the 90s case, it was hyperinflation, which drove interest rates sky high. And of course, I bought my first piece of property, my first chunk of farmland back in 1985. And I paid at that time 21.5% interest rate on that mortgage. Just imagine if we all had to start paying those types of mortgages instead of getting it at 4, 5, 6%. Or imagine the government of Canada having to pay or service the national debt at 21% interest rates. That would mean that essentially the amount of money that the government has today for its A-based funding, the main programs that we operate in all our departments, including national defense, would all have to go towards just servicing the debt. And we know the last time we hit a fiscal wall like this was during the Chrétien-Martin era. And what did they do to balance the budget? Well, the first thing they attacked was cutting health transfers to the provinces, cut down social transfers to the provinces. But the only thing they couldn't touch, because it's legislated, is the formula for equalization. So, they will offload as much as they can to the provinces and make the provinces look bad. But ultimately, it's all one taxpayer, and the taxpayer is going to have to spend or pay more to service the debt, to service that future ongoing deficits that Trudeau wants to undertake. So we have to deal with that. And before I get into answering the Q&A, I just want to recognize that today is World Suicide Prevention Day. We do want to make sure that anyone out there that is dealing with crisis, especially this time of COVID, if anyone is having thoughts of hurting themselves, please go and talk to someone, talk to a friend, talk to family members, call the helplines. Get the help that you need, talk to a healthcare professional so that you don't harm yourself. And so if you have someone in your family, in your circle of friends, let's reach out to them and let them know that we're thinking of them. And this is our opportunity to not just today, but every day, is to help those that are really struggling from a mental health standpoint and are having these horrible thoughts of self-harm. So one of the things that, of course, we deal with this in the Canadian Armed Forces. PTSD has taken its toll on our members and on our veterans. And this is a critical issue that we have to deal with in Canada. And it's a public health issue. And, I can tell you that Erin O'Toole has always been front and center of fighting this and reducing the stigma in the workforce and in our armed forces. And he's held events on the Hill to really, make sure that we were dealing with those that have struggled with mental health. Sam Sharp is a day that he's held on the Hill since he's been elected. Sam Sharp was a veteran who served in World War I, was a war hero and came home and ultimately took his own life. He's worked very closely with people like former Senator and former General Romeo Dallaire on raising awareness so that we continue to help those as they need help. And of course, making sure that we have the support out there right across the country for all Canadians, not just our veterans and those who currently serve. And we are going to put up on this Facebook page when we're done a video that Aaron just released talking about mental health and world suicide prevention. And it's interesting to note that in his shadow cabinet, he actually has a special advisor on mental health, and that's Todd Doherty, colleague of mine and friend from Caribou, Prince George in BC. And I know that this is one area that Todd has really worked hard at since he's been elected, and working with our first responders, working with veterans and Canadian Armed Forces, and working with all Canadians dealing with their mental health and getting the programs in place where we can do a better job of helping everyone with their mental health. So I'm going to start off with the questions, and Sid asks, when will we be ready for an election? So that's one of the reasons I'm down here already, and I just had a meeting on being election ready. I'll be having my first meeting with my campaign team in the coming week. And I can tell you that, in my opinion, and this is just my humble opinion, I believe that Trudeau, despite what he's saying, Trudeau wants an election now. He wants the opposition parties to defeat him. He doesn't want to face the music of more scandal, like the WE scandal, being exposed. He doesn't want us to get committees going and digging into how $343 billion has been racked up in new debt in the past 6 months. That's equivalent to $91,000 of new debt taken out in the name of every Canadian, every man, woman, and child. I don't know anyone that got $91,000, never mind a family of four getting, $364,000. Nobody's received money like that. And so where did all this money go? So there is more scandal percolating under the surface that we just have to be able to go in there, dig up the facts and find out what's happening. Like we saw with the WE scandal, $900 million to one agency. And because they never got the money because of the good work that we did as opposition and the media did in exposing the improprietorship of the sole source contract going to the WE charity, they've had to close the door. So, it just shows that WE charity could only function if they were given government money. And so what type of charity is it? What are they actually doing with the funds and the assets that they've accumulated over the years? And why were they in such trouble that they were able to get the ears of Liberal ministers like Marno and Chagger and others, and especially Trudeau, who was their good friend, in making sure that they received these taxpayer dollars. So we are ready for an election. We have already all our debt from the last campaign paid off. There's money in the bank, finances are in place, planes are being booked, buses are being booked. Platform will be written. It wasn't that long ago that we had platform that we want to polish off and update and make it so it resonates across the country and that it reflects the values that Aaron O'Toole ran on in the last leadership and convincingly won. Now, I'll just say this again, that most of these questions that I'm answering have been pre-submitted, and there is, people took the time to send them in. But again, you have the comment section here on the Facebook page. Just type in and Megan will get it to me so I can answer the question. Now, Dave and Dan are asking, when Conservatives win the next election, will they move forward with criminal investigations into all of the Liberal scandals and not just say it's in the past and they won't look into it? I'd like to see, and they would like to see more teeth to ethics violations. So I can tell you that if there is criminality, first of all, we've got to look at, there is a difference between criminality and something that's unscrupulous. So there's ethical violations, not working in the public good, working in their own personal interest. If that is actually, fraudulent, if it is actually something that violates the criminal code, then automatically those findings that are done either through the ethics commissioner or through parliamentary committee will be turned over to the RCMP. And I can tell you that it was under a Stephen Harper government that we brought in the code of ethics, that we established the ethics commissioner, and that we also made sure that all public office holders, especially cabinet ministers, parliamentary secretaries, deputy ministers, and high-level bureaucrats, and all MPs for that matter, fall under the code. But we also set up the office of the public prosecutor. And of course, this is the office that Jody Wilson-Raybould, when she was Minister of Justice, refused to interfere in on the SNC-Lavalin scandal. So that is a new office that was set up, over a decade ago under Stephen Harper. It was in the Accountability Act that we brought forward as his very first order of business when we were elected as government in 2006. And the public prosecutor is there to hold any criminal charges are fully prosecuted in a court of law on behalf of the people of Canada. And so we want to make sure that office remains independent. Justin Trudeau, of course, wants to see that still politically interfered with by the Attorney General of Canada, now Michael Lametti as our Minister of Justice. And we have to ensure that we strengthen the violations under the ethics code. So ethical violations right now, maximum fine is only $200, and for people of great wealth like Marnon and Trudeau, it's a pay $200 fine. And the idea behind it has always been that it's a naming and shaming that will impact them greater than anything else. But what we've learned under this Prime Minister, that Trudeau hasn't changed his behavior and continues to make huge ethical violations, whether it was going to Aga Khan Island and taking gifts that were definitely political in nature, trying to buy influence that exceeded the limits, flying on private aircraft, and now trying to reward his friends with sole source contracts. And there is others out there, like we know former Liberal MPs who have received contracts under the COVID-19 pandemic response, including building and distributing PPE. So, we have to make sure that naming and shaming goes beyond that in ethical violations. I've actually had suggested some time ago of seeing those, seeing more teeth in the code. I know that the Liberals would never go for it, even putting in place fines of up to $5,000 or $10,000. The Liberals would defeat it. But I think we should still pursue it. And it was promised by the Conservatives in the last election of actually bringing in fines and potential suspension from the House if you are found guilty of significant ethical violations, as we're seeing right now. David Lametti is Minister of Justice. I think I said that right. Anyway, so he is the Minister of Justice who is the Attorney General of Canada. And of course, he was who Trudeau used to replace Jody Wilson-Raybould after he fired her because she would not politically interfere in the public prosecutor's office on SNC-Lavalin. So, we do want to see more legislative reforms. We want to be able to protect whistleblowers. We want to ensure that taxpayer money is not be used to pay off Liberal friends or personal benefit. They need to be there to serve the people of Canada. So Anita asks, we need to clarify a lot of the information regarding COVID-19. Some businesses need to stay closed or reduced operations, yet we'll be sending children back to school. This is an oxymoronic statement. Is it safe to go back to status quo, or are we going to keep holding businesses and families back? So I know that the Liberal government today announced a transfer of $2 billion to the provinces to help them keep schools safe and keep them reopened. And that Trudeau also spoke with the premiers earlier this week, which is the first time he's talked to him since the end of July. You know, this is how this guy runs a country, is that he is essentially a dictator. That he doesn't like to even contact and speak to provincial premiers, and they're the front line and dealing with everything from healthcare to education. So we are looking at money coming in two stages. First $1 billion in September, another $1 billion in January. But you know what? The provinces didn't know this money was coming. Justin Trudeau only announced this, this week. Provinces have been asking for this for months already, that we need to make sure that we can get our students back to school safely. And we got schools that are already open in Manitoba, in Ontario, and Quebec, and right across this country after Labor Day. Most of the public schools reopen. So again, it's another failure, Justin Trudeau. Too little, too late, and we will continue to fight to get the answers why it took him so long to announce this money. And then, how is he announcing this money when Parliament's not even sitting? Camelo asks, will an O'Toole government commit in the first 2 years of government to top up Canada's defense budget to meet the requirements set up by NATO? Now, Aaron O'Toole believes strongly in meeting the NATO 2% target. It's very well possible, if the economy continues to slide the way it has, is that we'll hit 2% of GDP without even having to increase any military spending. I can tell you that as conservatives, we will not be cutting the defense budget. The Liberals are going to have to find a way to balance the books. When you don't have a strong fiscal position, one of the first places that we've seen in the past, and Liberals gave us the decade of darkness under Jean Chrétien, and it was go and take it from the military, steal it from our troops, steal it from our veterans, and don't properly protect our great country. So we have to be committed to working with our allies. We have to make sure that NATO and NORAD are that we're meeting our commitments under that by investing in our own military significantly. We have to replace our aging fighter jets. We have to replace our submarines. We have to make sure that the surface combatants are built on time and on budget, and that the joint supply ships are coming on stream. Our Army, Air Force, and Navy needs the equipment. We are in a new era of great world powers again rattling their sabers, whether it's Russia or China. And we have a United States who is becoming more and more withdrawn from international conflict. So alliances like NATO and NORAD become even more important, and working with our partners in the Five Eyes community, that's been US, UK, Australia, New Zealand, and ourselves, providing the ability to defend our sovereignty. Provide the ability for us to work collaboratively in defending the democratic world, and making sure that totalitarian regimes, whether they're in Beijing or Moscow or Tehran or elsewhere, aren't given free rein to raise havoc around the globe. So, of course, we don't know how bad this budget's going to be. We don't know where the numbers are going to finalize at. So it's going to take us some time. Aaron's already said it's going to probably take a decade just to get back to balanced budgets and start paying down the debt that's been run up by astronomical amounts. When Trudeau came to office, the national debt was sitting around $550 billion. Today, that national debt is going to go over $1 trillion. Trudeau, during the first 4 years of his mandate, had a chance to pay down the debt. Times were good, but he was running up $20-30 billion deficits every year, racked up a total of $89 billion in the good time. And now he's already spent $343 billion more than that is coming into the government of Canada. For the first 6 months, he wants to add another $100 billion a year indefinitely going forward. It's not sustainable because today's deficits and national debt is tomorrow's taxes. And we know that you aren't going to be able to tax your way out of this deficit, and we know that you're not going to be able to spend your way out of this crisis. So we do need to see better from the Liberals, and that's why I suspect that we will have an election so Trudeau can run on his socialist agenda and try to take away votes from the NDP and the Green Party. Kenny asks, Shadow Minister for Defense, what is your plan for military procurement, ensuring the armed forces are properly equipped, in particular replacing things like submarines, coastal defense vessels, pistols, and also making the procurement process more efficient? So last election, we actually ran on setting up a defense procurement secretariat within the PMO and the Privy Council office, that there would be a minister named that would be responsible and held accountable for delivering defense procurement. We do see using things like the National Defense Production Act as a way to stimulate the economy and help Canadian defense industries drive the new economy as we ramp up manufacturing again, and really good paying jobs so that we can recover from the COVID crisis. So, you know, there is a lot of talk around making sure we maintain sovereignty through a lot of our defense production. So that's why it's important to have ships built in Canada. That's why it's important to have, you know, Colt Canada as a domestic supplier of firearms for the Canadian Armed Forces. And there are other companies in Canada like PWG or PGW in Winnipeg that build sniper rifles. You know, there is other companies that we should be using in Canada to ensure that we maintain sovereignty over our defense industries. And that can be said for most manufacturing, that, you know, Beijing and the Communist Party of China has been very effective at insidiously taking over supply chains in manufacturing around the world. And by doing that, we've lost our sovereignty. And as we're seeing right now, we can't get things like vaccines from China because of their own geopolitical reality that we face with China. But yeah, so we do need to make sure that procurement is done on time and on budget. These are big, complicated projects. These are big ships. We want to see new fighter jets selected as quickly as possible. The competition is wrapped up. The government can make the decision on what is in the best interest of our Royal Canadian Air Force, and working with our allies in defending North America and defending NATO. So I just say, that we have to continue on that process. And I'm also a big believer in getting new submarines. You know, that may be one that we have to buy offshore because we don't have any capability to build submarines in Canada, or no experience in Canada at this time. So I've always said that the best way to one of the greatest proliferation of weapon systems in the world right now, outside of new missile technology, is actually submarines. And the best way to defend against submarines is by having submarines. And so we need to have subs in the water and all three coastlines to defend our great nation from, you know, nefarious players around the world who have submarines and want to test our defense capabilities. So we need new subs, and we need them sooner than later. Well, William asked, when is Canada going to pick a winner for the new fighter jet for the Canadian Air Force? And so that competition is closed. There was a slight extension to the end of July because of COVID. So my understanding is that those documents have all been submitted. Those bids have been submitted to the Government of Canada. They're going to take their time, I guess, to look at them. But, you know, there's 3 planes in the competition from Saab, from Boeing, and from Lockheed Martin, the F-35, the Super Hornet, and the Gripen. So, you know, we do have 3 planes that the government is considering. It's just a matter of making sure that they go through with this and not walk back away because of not having the budget to do it now. So Dave asks, is the Conservative Party willing to stop all funding to the CBC and all media outlets? He also said it must drive the Liberal spies nuts when they watch a session like this. They're used to a smug Liberal telling lies and trying to talk circles while not making any sense and avoiding to answer anything. And here you have a well-spoken Conservative who's answering the question presented with an actual plan for Canada. Well, thanks a lot, Dave. I appreciate it. Hey, I've always been a straight shooter, and I always want to It's in my nature to answer the question, and that's what drives me nuts about question period right now. You go and ask any question you want, and especially Marno, he was the master at spinning and skating and avoiding the real issue. That was so frustrating for all of us in the Conservative caucus. But hey, let's just say this on CBC. Aaron O'Toole campaigned, and one of his first statements as leader is that he will defund English CBC. We will keep Radio Canada since it's an underserved market. We will keep CBC Radio because it is a true public broadcaster and doesn't compete against other radio stations in trying to get advertising dollars, a shrinking market, by the way. I've also said in the last campaign, and Aaron said it in his leadership race, that we will stop the media subsidy, the $565 billion a year that has been going to liberal-friendly media outlets. So we want to make sure that stops as well. And at the end of the day, this is first and foremost all taxpayer money. And secondly, people are changing the way that they get the news and the way they watch, TV. It's all now pay-per-view, it's Netflix, it's Amazon Prime, it's Walt Disney Channel, it's all the specialty stations that you can bundle up on satellite. And really, and we know that most Canadians get their media off the internet. Last time I looked, out of 34 million Canadians, that almost a third of Canadians now's number one source of news is Facebook. I don't know if that's good or bad, especially I'm here using Facebook as a platform, but it is how people are interacting now, and it is through social media, and that is their source of news, and it is easy to go and find the articles that you want or that you're interested in, and it's more and more difficult for broadcasting, but things change. They always have changed, and change is a good thing. I know a lot of people hate change, but and the way we get our news is something that will continue to evolve as we go forward. Whether it's in a 140 character universe like Twitter, or it's on other social media platforms, and it's up to us as educated Canadians, as educated voters, to discern through the information received and decide what we believe and what we don't. So we will continue to make sure that we have a healthy, free press that's independent, that isn't being bought up by the Liberals. We want to make sure that the private sector can step in as much as they can. So, this is really something that we need to look at the bigger picture, and it doesn't require taxpayer dollars to do it. And hell, at the end of the day, this is about competition, and that we do have, we in competition and in a free market, those that succeed will make money, and those that don't leave. And so that capitalist ideology that we use throughout the economy applies as well, and should apply unbridled within the media industry as well. Bob asks, if Murnau is fired for accepting the trip which he tried to hide, what would the Prime Minister get for vacationing with Aga Khan? So when we do know is Murnau has left the building. So Bill Murnau has resigned resigned, air quotes, as Minister of Finance. Chrystia Freeland is Minister of Finance now. She will go along with Trudeau in bringing forward his socialist agenda. We always got to remember that he admired communist dictatorships around the world. And essentially, I think that's where we're headed. And if you look at the way he's behaved, including under this COVID crisis, he tried to get completely unlimited executive powers from Parliament to spend during this pandemic without any checks and balances coming from the House of Commons, the Senate, or any parliamentarian for that matter. We know that what he said back in the 2015 election, that he admired communist regimes and the way that they can run their governments and economy and turn it on a dime. Of course you can. When you got a dictator, they can do whatever they want. Everybody's scared of the strong man. And then you have on top of that, the whole magnitude of how he tried to rig our electoral system. And when he didn't get what he wanted, he decided to stick with status quo. But preferential balance, for example, which I know that a lot of people, especially NDP and the Green and smaller parties like, Trudeau wanted, or they wanted, a proportional representation. Trudeau wants a preferential ballot because he knows that he's second choice amongst NDP and Green voters, and he will get super majorities on a preferential ballot rather than first past the post, which we have right now, which provides a competitive and historically proven democracy, and has worked very well in all the free countries of the world. Eric and Elaine ask, why are the Conservatives not supporting the $600 COVID support people with disabilities? So I can tell you, and then they go on, Conservatives support all the other COVID programs, but why did they leave out people with disabilities? So just want to make you sure, don't buy the Liberal spin. The Liberals tried to blame us and the NDP for stopping the first attempt of having a special $600 a month COVID payment for people with disabilities. And that reason that they tried to ram that through at the end of June. And there was also part of that bill that they're going to put criminal charges against those that might have gotten extra payments on their CERB. And we know that not all cases was those extra payments done fraudulently. A lot of it happened accidentally. Sometimes it was done by the department themselves, and people were unaware of it, and Trudeau wanted to turn them all into criminals. And so we voted against the main bill. It was a 4-piece omnibus bill, and we voted against that part of it. And actually, it never even came to a vote. He pulled it off the table because it was going to be defeated. We didn't say we'd defeat it. We actually wanted changes, or at least break the bill apart and take that section out, and then we could pass the other 3 parts of it to extend CERB and provide the $600 COVID payment and the others. So just so you also know, Eric and Lane, is that this bill received royal assent. That means that it passed on July 27th. So it has already gone through Parliament. Those checks have been mailed, and we do support wholeheartedly people living with disabilities, that they deserve to be treated with respect. And we want to make sure that this one-time payment was out as quick as we could. So, and we'll continue to look at things like having the disability tax credit. We want to make sure that that can be easily accessed and not have to go through this layered bureaucracy and red tape to prove that you have a disability. Judy says, the economic recovery will be as vital as our public health recovery. I hear your comments and concern, but can't hear what the Conservative plan is. I hope all the parties will try to stand together, putting politics aside for the sake of our country and people. Now, we do live in a competitive parliamentary system. Parties have different ideas. I think overall, over the last 6 months, that we've been able to work together collaboratively in a way to deliver funds to Canadians in a very expedited manner. We have managed quite well compared to our neighbors to the south. We haven't done as well as some of our friends over across the Atlantic or across the Pacific. But so we're always learning and always looking at different things. But I can guarantee you this, that Erin O'Toole as our leader, that we will be putting forward either very shortly around the throne speech or in the upcoming potential federal election that Trudeau really wants to see brought about. We will have a positive vision on both dealing with the pandemic and dealing with our economy, and ensuring that our small businesses, our mom and pop stores that we have up and down our main streets in all our communities, whether it's in Portage and Maine and Winnipeg, or whether it's up and down the main streets of Portage and Asher and Arborg, Selkirk, Steinbach, all our communities across our country rely on small business. They generate over 60% of the workforce are working in small business. And so we have to make sure that our independent small business family-run operations are supported, and that they can recover when this is done. Not all of them will. We already hear about massive business closures, especially in the service industry. So we have to continue to provide the dollars that we can afford in a way that works to the benefit of all. I can also say that, we will start seeing, some ideas coming from Aaron O'Toole and how we can, stimulate the economy, how we can get people off programs and back to work. There's still over a million Canadians, million more than what there was before this pandemic, that are not working yet. A lot of them in full-time jobs. And so we got to make sure that that comes together. But as a government in waiting, the Conservative Party will be bringing forward a positive vision, a positive plan, which we aren't seeing from Justin Trudeau. He still plays very divisive politics and seems to be at times flying by the seat of his pants. So Bridget and Anita ask, why does a member of Parliament get a full pension after 6 years, but a CAF member after putting 25 years has no service pay anymore? I'll just say this, is that only, 43% of parliamentarians never ever qualify for a pension. Either they pass away before they can collect, or they are defeated before they got their 6 years in. It is not a full pension. Pensions can't be collected until age 65. Pensions are reflective of years served and money paid in. Like I know, like our pensions cost us around $40,000 a year. So it's the old gold-plated pension. Well, Prime Minister Harper made sure we got rid of it. And so what we have is one that is funded equally between the employer and the employee, that being the government and the member of Parliament. It's based, like all other public pensions, it's an annuity based upon years of service. And how much you've paid in over that time frame. So the longer you serve, the bigger your pension, of course. But it's after 6 years, it's only 18% of your salary. So, and you can't clock to age 65. So there is a lot of misperceptions out there of what the parliamentary pension is. Now, with our members of Canadian Armed Forces, we need to look at how we streamline people that are coming out of the armed forces. 25 years in is considered full service, and of course they don't receive severance at that time. But we ought to make sure that the transition from Department of National Defense over to Veterans Affairs becomes seamless, and that when you leave your service as a member of the Canadian Armed Forces, is that you shouldn't be waiting weeks or months, in some cases years, especially if you're a reservist, for the department to figure out what you're entitled to from a pension standpoint. And also any other benefits that you receive, especially for injury that's attributable to service in the name of Crown and country, that should be determined by the very agency that's releasing you, which is the Department of National Defense. The Canadian Armed Forces are the ones that say whether or not you meet the universality of service. And so if you're being released because of injuries that are attributable to service, and that could be both visible and invisible injuries like mental health, those things should be determined and benefits established before the individual is asked to transition back into the civilian life. So, there needs to be making sure that we deal with that. Now, I know that wait times have grown despite the Liberals, reopening offices that we had closed. The reason we closed offices is because they were in areas that were receiving very few veterans. And so what we're trying to do is move resources so that veterans in low serviced areas still had access to their claims advisors, and that they could still talk face to face with someone. They just were moved from a Veterans Affairs office into a Service Canada office. And then there was also the entire issue around having enough people adjudicating veterans' claims. That has grown under the Liberals' tenure. Backlogs continue to get out of hand, in my opinion. And of course, having COVID-19 has exacerbated that, because more and more people have been forced to work from home. And when you work from home, not everyone has access to their files, a lot of them confidential files that are sitting on their computers back at the office, whether they're stationed in one of the local Veterans Affairs offices or at the main office in Charlottetown. So as you know, I know for a fact that in the Department of National Defense, not everybody can work from home because the system doesn't have the ability to provide people with secure access into the system all at one time from remote computers. It's not like you're on a local access network where everything is closed looped and secure. So it makes it next to impossible to hack. So in the world we live in today, cybersecurity has to be paramount in the decisions that we make. And that's why we're seeing some things slow down. And unfortunately, it isn't back. And, you know, you also, Bridget and Nita also make the comment, why does back always seem to put up walls in adjudicating these claims? And I've always said that is that too many people in back treat the programs as if they're insurance brokers, and that they're there to, or not insurance broker, but insurance adjusters, and they're there to protect the purse rather than to serve the veteran. And we know that after numerous delays and resubmission of information and talking to other medical practitioners, that ultimately 90+% of the claims are found in favor of the veteran. So why are we wasting time, resources, and putting on all this blood, sweat, and tears and stress on our veterans to go through that unnecessary process? So I'd rather see Veterans Affairs err on the side of the veteran, and then they can always go back and audit and ensure that it is a legitimate claim. To that way, you still are protecting taxpayer money. But the veteran at the start of it is getting what they're entitled to in over 98% of the time. So that's the thing that we have to balance off. So Kim asked, what is O'Toole's plan for healthcare, and will there be any cuts? And that's interesting because actually Aaron just following the meeting that Ontario and Quebec had together this week, talked about having to ensure that we will work with the provincial governments that will provide long-term, stable, and predictable funding for healthcare and other social programs. Unlike what the Liberals have done in the past, when they get their budgets all out of whack and deficits are running out of control, they cut healthcare. They undermine our social safety net, and we want to make sure that we are able to deliver healthcare without having to raise taxes to cover off crazy spending that's been happening under the Liberals. So we also want to make sure that, that the overall pandemic response that we have going forward, that the public safety aspect and the implementation of response is much quicker than what we experienced under Justin Trudeau, that we would have stockpiles of personal protective equipment around this country. Where Justin Trudeau was burning it in Regina, we would have made sure that that stockpile would have been replaced before it expired. And even when it expired, we could have gone through and tested it to ensure that it was all still usable and been able to move it into our healthcare system. So wherever Trudeau has failed, it's been, again, pass the buck off down to the provinces and on to our local hospitals and healthcare professionals instead of stepping up, leading, and making sure that Canada is ready. And I can tell you that with an Aaron O'Toole as Prime Minister, someone that has that military training and understands the need to get out in front of these issues and plan for the worst, but hope for the best, we're going to be in a lot better shape with Aaron as Prime Minister and Conservatives in power. Connor asked, when are you guys going to stop the Liberals from taking our guns? And I can tell you that the NDP and the Bloc have supported the Liberals on this. So essentially you got a majority in government. The only way that we're going to be able to get rid of the Liberal government is by defeating them in a federal election. And of course, again, Trudeau is completely misdirected and misguided and going after certain styled firearms. We know that the gun crime that we're seeing on our streets are 99% of the time smuggled or stolen firearms. That law-abiding firearms owners are not the problem, but Trudeau and the Liberals have no problem in vilifying legal gun owners in this country. So we have to make sure that we will stand up for our gun owners. I am a gun owner. I have my possession acquisition license. I have my gun locker. It's all steel. It's all locked, and my firearms are all trigger locked on top of that. So we have to continue to promote safe storage and handling. We have to promote our way of life as firearms owners. And we have to make sure that Trudeau isn't able to take advantage of the fear and anxiety around gun crime, which are being done by very specific criminals. And so we need to make sure that the investments are into anti-gun behavior, or into stopping, guns and gangs. So anti-gang behavior is something that we have to invest in. We have to stop the illegal flow of firearms, the Glocks and the midnight specials that get smuggled over the border as part of the drug trade. So more resources to frontline officers, whether they're border security or municipal police or our RCMP, and that they have the ability to take down those that are running guns and those that are using them to illicit crime. So, and we have to also support prosecutors in our courts so that they are better handled and educated on making sure that those that deal in illegal guns, those that use illegal guns, are the ones that ultimately pay the price. Wayne asks, if the we matter fades like SNC Lavalin, Trudeau again will get through this and keep his popularity intact? Are we up for another 4 years of Liberals? Well, I can tell you we has closed its doors, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, because of their financial pressure and woes, and that all comes down to them losing all their sponsorship now because nobody trusts them. But ultimately, this all reflects on the current Liberal government and Justin Trudeau. It was the Finance Committee that uncovered the $900 million scandal. This is our tax dollars that Trudeau was trying to shuffle over into his friends that it is inherent upon us, not just as politicians, but as the voters, as Canadians, to make sure that our friends, neighbors, and family are well aware of the unethical and corrupt behavior of this Liberal government, that Justin Trudeau is always about, padding the pockets of his friends and his family. His mom and his brother were getting paid by wheat. That is completely in violation of his responsibility as a prime minister to remove himself from and recuse himself from these matters. Let's see here. We're getting near the end here, and we've been on for just about an hour. Want to make sure we're not duplicating. I've had a few people ask us about pension reform, protecting private pensions, updating the old age pension, CPP. CPP has been updated, and when CPP was first introduced back in 1967, the idea behind it was that it would provide retirement up to a third of one's annual income before retirement. So that's the way it's always been kind of calculated, up to a max of around $50,000 a year, just over that. Then we have old age. And so CPP is funded by Canadians and the place of employment pay into CPP. It's not government revenue. You do have the whole issue of old age security and guaranteed income supplement. That's completely taxpayer funded on an annual basis. That's where there is some flexibility. It comes down to policy by government on whether or not there are increases on OAS and GIS. And ultimately, how do we protect private pensions that people are part of in companies? And we recently had Sears go bankrupt, and before that we had Nortel, and pensions were lost. Pensions that are regulated at the provincial level, but there is the Bankruptcy and Insolvency Act of Canada that so there's a number of us have been championing for some time, and hasn't got through the House yet, and the government doesn't seem to be on side with this, but to ensure that the underfunded and unfunded pension plans aren't used as collateral for lending institutions by the companies that you work with, and so that those pension funds should be held separately and away from the public accounts of the corporation, which will be used to pay off, financial institutions and other suppliers. So anyway, that's just a quick on it. I should also mention, and some people are asking about, non-confidence motions, why we haven't to defeat this government, whether it's on SNC-Lavalin, on their gun grab, which was done unilaterally and undemocratically through an order in council. I expect that, Justin Trudeau, if he does not trigger an election himself, he wants to make sure, in my opinion, he wants to fight Donald Trump while he's still in office. If he waits too long, Trump may lose the White House and maybe a Joe Biden administration, although, the numbers down there are quite fluid when it comes to polling. But he'd rather fight with Donald Trump in office than not. He wants to make sure that, he gets in front of the people with his ideas that he's going to present in the throne speech and how to change Canada forever into a socialist nation. I would expect that, he wants to make sure that happens before, pundits and political parties like the Conservatives get up and reply to the speech from the throne and point out all the flaws in what he's proposing. I think that he also wants to get out and have an election before people have to start paying back their CERB, or CERB's cut off, or CEBA is ended, or the tax bill comes in April. So, I think that we're on a fast track towards an election. That's why we're getting ready. We definitely don't want an election. I think the more time that Canadians get to see Aaron O'Toole perform and see how intelligent he is, and also how great a speaker he can be, and he's just a fantastic communicator. I think that once people see that, it will work against Trudeau. And so Trudeau's taken a play right out of Jean Chrétien's playbook and call a snap election after Stockwell Day won in 2000 or in 1998 in that election. So there is things that Trudeau has learned and what he wants to do. But even if he doesn't call a snap election himself, there are at least 5 confidence motions that are before the House. That would be the test of his throne speech. It comes down, all opposition parties have to vote against it to defeat the government. Right now, we aren't sure what the NDP are going to do. They say they're ready for an election. I don't think they are financially. I don't know if Singh wants to go back to the people after just getting trounced in the last federal election a year ago. So that's why I'm saying if Trudeau thinks Singh's going to blink, and support his throne speech, he still may want the election anyway, and so he'll call it rather than go down to defeat. But there is opportunities coming forward for all political parties to get together to defeat the Trudeau government. And I think that we've been going for almost an hour now, and I'll just, sorry, I couldn't get to all the questions. I appreciate all the questions that came forward. And if you'd like more clarification, just email us back. You can always email us at office@jamesbazan.com, or you can also just go back onto the Facebook page here and drop a comment down saying, hey, you didn't answer this question. Can you please send one to me? We'll always be happy to email you back. I appreciate that so many of you have taken time out of your day to tune in, to have this conversation. I know I do a lot of talking, but I do like to try to explain what's happening up here in Ottawa. And ultimately, I hope that everybody's staying safe and staying healthy. And summer comes to an end. I hope you had a great summer at home with your family. I know I did, but I am very anxious to get back to work up here in Ottawa. If we're going to send all our kids back to school, and people are traveling across this country again on airplanes without social distancing, then parliamentarians should be prepared to come back here to Ottawa and work. Parliament sitting in the UK, Congress is sitting in the United States, and every provincial legislature is meeting. Only here in Ottawa under Justin Trudeau, we're not. And why is that? It's because Justin Trudeau doesn't want to be questioned for his unethical behavior and his poor response to COVID and his lack of a plan to get our economy going while not respecting any fiscal anchors on making sure that our national debt is not being run out of control and going to belabor the next generation and the generations beyond that in paying off his excesses and keeping Canada from being an economic powerhouse that it should be. Ladies and gentlemen, again, thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you again